Well, thank you, Clarence, and good morning, everyone. On behalf of Comcast, it's a great pleasure for us to be participating in this conference today, focused on big ideas, and even more so for me to be in a room with people who typically know how to take good ideas and implement them. And so often we find big ideas come in the package of technology these days, which is more of a reason why we at Comcast care about this passionately. So I want to start with a short story to give some context about why I care about this passionately. About 3 years ago, when I was traveling quite a bit, and feels like I'm doing that all over again these days, I had this habit of standing at the doorway as I was waiting for the taxi to arrive to take me to the train station or the airport. And my two young sons, who were at the time 4 and 3, would stand at the steps on the landing. And I would shout up to them, "I love you to someplace and back." From the children's story, "I love you this much." I see a couple nods, little nut brown hair and big nut brown hair. Smiles, good, good. And so on one of these mornings, I looked up and I said, "I love you to Mount Kilimanjaro and back." And so my 4-year-old looks down at me and he says, "Ooh, where's that?" And so I look up at him and I say, "When I get home, we'll research it." And my kids then knew what research was. So the next evening, I get home around dinner time, throwing my bags down, taking my jacket off, and my 4-year-old walks up to me, iPad in hand, and he says, "Daddy, can we research that Mount Kilimanjaro?" Yeah, that. So I said, "Sure." So I pick up the iPad, and at first I was going to do a search, and then I thought, let me try something different. So I tapped on Google Earth, and thank you to my friends from Google for this. So Google Earth opens up, and I type in Mount Kilimanjaro, and I misspell it as I've done ever since then, and it autocorrects for me, and I hit enter. And Google Earth periscopes up from the top of our house in Philadelphia. It goes over the Delaware River, over New Jersey. It picks up speed across the Atlantic Ocean, getting into Africa, and then it slows down as we get into Tanzania, and then it slowly periscopes down onto the snow-capped mountains of Mount Kilimanjaro. So my 4-year-old looks down, he looks at me, he looks down again, and he says, "Is that snow?" I said, "Yes, there's snow in Africa." So now I started to get the hang of this, and I said, "So, Tazio, my 4-year-old, where does cousin Frank live?" He says, "South Africa." "Where's that?" And he takes his little finger, a 4-year-old, and he drags down Africa to the very bottom to South Africa. I said, "That's right." And looking off to the right, I said, "What's that?" And he says, "Madagascar." Every kid knows where Madagascar is, right? I said, "Very good." And I said, "Oh, where are the pyramids?" Daddy was at the pyramids a year before. And he said, "Egypt?" I said, "That's right. Do you know where that is?" He said, "No." And so Daddy takes his finger and he drags it up to Egypt. So why do I tell that story? There's really 2 reasons. The first is that I get reminded every time I tell that story about the unfairness of the digital divide in this country. Mayor knows that I live in an incredibly diverse neighborhood in Philadelphia, and Roberto Clemente Playground is 2 blocks away from my house. And my kids play there with a bunch of kids from the neighborhood, and these are all kids that have the same laugh, the same smile. I could close my eyes and it'd be hard to pick out which one was my kid. And yet, every night when we go home 2 blocks, my kids come home to something different than many of those kids. My children walk in the front door and they have 3 computers, they have 2 iPads, they have 2 iPhones. So every night, every week, every month, my children are getting a little bit further ahead than many of the kids on Roberto Clemente Playground. And it's not because they're smarter. Trust me, I know the stock they come from. But they have an inherent advantage that is inherently unfair. Reason 1. Reason 2 is I learned an incredible lesson in that teachable moment with my children. I had already had blazing fast speeds from Comcast internet service. I had some of the best hardware from Apple in my iPad and some of the best software from Google in my house all along. But I didn't figure out how to really use that technology until that moment. And it was serendipity. I stumbled into it. And so it taught me a lesson about how important it is for us as humans to figure out how do we use this technology. So we all know that broadband and technology are incredibly important to our future and to our cities. It's our passport to the 21st century. And we're fortunate in this country to have an abundance of incredible broadband networks and incredible technology. But there really is a very ridiculous irony in all of this. We know the statistics that tell us that 30% of people in our cities and around the country don't have access to this technology at home. And quite frankly, in certain neighborhoods, those numbers are considerably worse. So I learned a lot over the last 30 months about this problem when we launched Internet Essentials through Comcast. We launched this around the country to help close the digital divide, working with poor neighborhoods and poor families to get them connected. But the lesson that I learned was a little bit different than the lesson that I thought I was going to learn. So I'm a technology person. I love talking about technology. Part of my job is to advocate on behalf of technology. And the bright, shiny object always catches my eye. But the thing that I learned in this process had more to do with the importance of the human network. Because in the end, the technology is out, it's around us. Sometimes it's in front of our house. It's not the challenge. The challenge is how do you connect people to the technology to do great things? And the answer ends up being simpler and yet harder than we really would have imagined. The lesson that I learned over the last 30 months is that the human network is the network that will save us. It will leverage technology. It will make us smarter. It will make us healthier. It will make us safer. It'll help us make money. But it can only do that if we know how to use it. And so one of the things that we ended up learning over the last two months is that working with mayors, working with churches, working with community-based organizations on a neighborhood by neighborhood basis, you connect the human network to the technology. I know it sounds really too simple, but sometimes we get so fascinated by the bright, shiny object that we miss the human connection to that bright, shiny object. So I look forward to a time 25 years from now when, God help me, one of my grandsons or granddaughters is looking at one of my sons and says, "Daddy, where's Mount Kilimanjaro?" And I'm confident that there'll be some new fancy technology out there that my sons will be able to show them where Mount Kilimanjaro is. Maybe it's virtual reality. But I'm equally confident that the human connection that my sons will have to their children will matter more than any of that. And so my hope is in this conversation of big ideas, that our big ideas are about connecting all of our citizens in this country to the internet. But as we look out, we don't miss what's right in front of us. It's the people in this room. It's the people in our neighborhoods. It's the human connection to technology. So thank you for letting me be here today.